Greetings, Kaiju United viewers, listeners, however you're tuning in, via video, via text, like we usually do. I'm here with Matt Frank, and I don't think this guy needs any introduction because he's kind of a dude in the community you all know and love. But I'm just really ecstatic to sit down with him one on one for the first time in my life, really. So, Matt, do you want to introduce yourself for those people that may not know who you are?
I was gonna say you're very kind to be like, oh, somebody in the community you all know and love, and I'm like, well, one of those things is true. The no, it's very flattering. Thank you. Yeah. So, well, my name is Matt. Matt Frank, as you said. I am a artist mostly, although I've been getting more into writing recently. I think the thing that most Godzilla fans know me from is the lead artist on Godzilla Rulers of Earth for IDW Publishing. And then the other things you would probably know me from, I mean, I did a bunch of stuff for IDW, but I've also done the artwork for the Gamera Blu-ray set from Arrow Video, the artwork for the Daimajins set from Arrow Video. I recently did the artwork for the Gorgo release from Vinegar Syndrome. I've done Redman and the Kaiju Hunter. That was another comic that I worked on. I've been around. I've been doing stuff.
If you see anything officially licensed with kaiju art on it, there's a 85% chance that it's Matt. The other 25 or whatever percent is Bob, but we're not talking about Bob today.
No, I think that's a very generous estimation, but you're not that far off. I've definitely worked on a lot of stuff.
But we're going to go back a little bit before we jump into the cool, fun home video stuff.
Yeah.
What was your first exposure to kaiju media? What started the whole thing for you?
It was definitely a confluence of factors. I was like a little, as a little kid, a lot of us are introduced to this stuff when we're kids. And I was like really into dinosaurs, of course. So it was through just pop culture osmosis that I was exposed to Godzilla, because like my parents and other people were like, well, here, this is Godzilla, you might like that. And I'm like, I do. But I would say the fandom part of it, the thing that kind of really is like these core memory flashpoints are I was at a like a family restaurant with my parents when I was a kid in San Antonio, and they had one of those big inflatable Godzillas out in the back, in like the playscape area, like the kind you see at like an auto like a car dealership or something, and so, and as a little kid, it felt like it was like Godzilla in real life. Like it felt like that, and we were just playing under him. And I remember that was a big like flashpoint moment where I was like, "Oh yeah, this is pretty cool." And then there are other little moments, like I saw a couple of the movies when I was young, like Godzilla versus the Sea Monster was the first one I had on VHS that I watched it over and over and over. And I didn't fast forward like a plebeian chud. I watched that movie because I actually really like those characters, and I think that story is really well done. And then there were lots of other stuff. But I think at this point it's a little more accurate to be like, what was the introduction point for each individual franchise? Because like, which I'm not going to go through all of those, but I remember when I got introduced to Gamera, I was watching. I had gotten a VHS copy of Legend of the Dinosaurs. That kind of Jaws knockoff from Toei.
I still need to see that, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's worth watching because it's so weird. Like it's structurally really awkward, and the story is not very good. But it was ambitious. But it's not a movie for kids. It was like a Jaws style horror movie. But the VHS I had said just for kids on it. It's like kids entertainment, and I'm like, well, I like dinosaurs. And the movie really creeped me out even as a kid. I remember being really upset by it, but still kind of fascinated. But then at the end of it, the kid like host, he was like a mini horror host. He came on with like a Freddy Krueger glove. He was like, "Oh, I want to show you more monster movies," and then it was like a bunch of trailers of Gamera movies, and I'm like, he's like a turtle. He's a turtle, and he can shoot fire, and he can fly. That was really when I realized that there was a whole ephemera. Like there was a whole like broader universe of kaiju stuff, and then it was just downhill from there.
I think that's quite. I think that's an event people need to talk about more in their like journeys as fans.
Yeah.
Is what was the? What, I guess I'm going to use an MCU moment because I don't know. That's kind of what I also grew up with alongside Godzilla. So like the Nick Fury moment where Nick Fury's like, "You think you're the only superhero out there?" What the moment that fans find out that Godzilla is not the only one, and there's a whole world of this stuff out there. I think
I
that's a
did.
super overlooked moment.
Oh yeah, no, I think another moment like that for me, you may have seen it or heard of it. It was a VHS tape called "Fantastic Dinosaurs of the Movies."
Yes, I have that.
Yeah, I found it on YouTube the other day, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Because that was like they had Gorgo, they had I think they had Reptilicus, they had 20 Million Miles to Earth, and the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, and
No.
just like I was like, "This is like a smorgasbord of weird lizards," and yeah, I that's another big one for me. Yeah, I love that stuff.
Good stuff. So later on in Matt's life, Matt started a DeviantArt account that you may all know as Kaiju Samurai. You did this thing called Godzilla Neo, where you basically redesigned like everybody,
Mhm.
almost every single Toho Godzilla kaiju to ever grace the screen. So my first question with that is why? Why go
Why?
that far?
Why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself? Um, I think that's actually a really good question. Because it's so funny. Sometimes I'll get asked about Godzilla Neo, and I'll usually respond with like, oh, Godzilla Neo, or or kind of like, I'm playing it up, I'm just being silly. And I've had people like then later go online who had asked me about it, and they'll ask me about it at like G Fest or some convention or something, and they'll be like, I asked Matt about Godzilla Neo and he got angry. And I'm like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. It was a joke. It was a jape. It was a gaff. It was a goofus and gallant. I'm just screwing with you. So, so really honestly, I've thought about this a lot. And Godzilla Neo is one of those things where I was just there was no Godzilla stuff. Like there was just because I'm sure you remember, and a lot of people probably remember the empty decade, this barren wasteland between like 2004 and 2014. I mean, there was like fits and starts. You got the Gamma the Brave and Cloverfield and the Peter Jackson King Kong and all the stuff that kind of fit into that genre. And then Pacific Rim kind of heralded the return in a lot of ways, but it there was just nothing. There was just nothing, and so I remembered a couple of points. Like I think I was in college when I started making that, and I remembered like reading GFan as was my want, and I was reading an article about this is probably a first. I don't know if I've ever told this story. I was reading an article in GFan about the Koichi Kawakita directed pachinko machine footage. You know what I'm talking
I know
about?
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remembered like seeing like, oh, they filmed new footage of the Shobijin, and they filmed footage of Godzilla and Gigan and Gearus and stuff. And I was looking at that, and I started thinking like, yeah, there are these unified things that keep cropping up in the Godzilla franchise. Like I knew that, but I hadn't really given it a lot of serious thought before then. And I was at the time I was also a big fan of Ultimate Spider-Man, and how they kind of the team at Marvel kind of took all the Spider-Man stuff, mythos, yeah, and a lot of the broader Marvel stuff anyway, and they streamlined it all down into this one coherent narrative, where certain things kind of interwove with each other and certain things related to other things. And those two things together started making me think, "So I could do this with Godzilla. Like somebody could do this with Godzilla really easily. I could do that with Godzilla really easily." So it became like, and I've got the notebook somewhere of like, I'm in like an economics course or something at the University of Texas. I should be paying attention. I'm not. I am like filling my notebook like, well, here's what Godzilla would look like. Here's what Space Godzilla would look like. Here's what Rodan would look like. And then I just started doing it, and I think that, and of course it got, people really liked it because wasn't really much else. I think there might have been one or two other artists who were kind of doing something similar, but but we were all just so starved for content that we were having to make our own content. And for me, it was Godzilla Neo, where it's like, well, I'm just gonna do it. I'll make my own with blackjack and hookers.
I was just about to say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly.
Fine, I'll make my own Godzilla.
Exactly. So yeah, that really was the and I think it was just positive feedback. People were liking it so much. I just kept, and I was like, well, there's more monsters to do. There's more monsters to do. There's always more monsters to do.
Capitalism's kind of boring. I'm gonna draw the gargantuas in this class.
I mean, yeah, that's really kind of the long and the short of it. I mean, I have a BFA in fine art. You know that I needed like the barest minimum non-art program, like non-art credit. Like I took like a basic algebra course, and it was definitely one of those courses where it was like, you can use a note card for the final exam, and you can use front and back, but you can't do outside of it. You can only use that note card. And man, I aced that final exam. I was in the margins, baby. So those are the kind of classes that I was just like, all right, I'm checking out. I'm gonna figure out how the whole Orochi timeline works.
That's good. And you've come back to it too. If I recall correctly, like when Godzilla 14 came out, you did one for the legendary Godzilla. I do
Yeah.
not recall if you've done one for Shin. I have improperly researched.
That's okay. I did do one for Shin. I did one for Godzilla. I did one for Shin. I did one for a couple of the legendary monsters, and I think I did a Godzilla Earth as well. And I came up with this whole story to kind of relate to it about like, oh, it's a possible future, you know. And but as the Godzilla franchise has really kind of fractionalized, even though it's all in recent years, it's all been kind of under this new regime, for lack of a better term, with Toho. There's so much of it now, and it's going in so many different directions that I'm just like, I don't think I need to. I have nothing else to add. Honestly, I'm busy doing official Godzilla stuff. That's why I haven't been doing any more Godzilla Neo recently. I've got other stuff to do, but it's nice. It's nice that people like it and people have such fond memories of it.
So your first official credited work was the Ray Harryhausen Presents, and I have the title written down here, but I can't read my chicken scratch.
It's Ray
It is,
Harryhausen
yeah.
Presents.
Back to Mysterious Island. I can
That was
read.
it. Yeah.
Yes. Can you tell us anything about that?
That was a really, really interesting confluence of factors because the publisher was Blue Water Productions, which I don't think they're around anymore. I think they changed their name or something. I don't know, but they were now are kind of notorious for just like never paying their artists, which honestly is kind of par for the course for a lot of comic stuff, which is kind of sad. It's like, yes, I'm glad this stuff exists, but maybe these people should be paid. I don't know. Anyway, that's a 7-hour argument. So with regards to that though, the editor in chief at Blue Water reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you're clearly a Godzilla fan. You're clearly a monster fan. I like your monster stuff. Can you make some? Do you want to make a comic? Because you also seem to have designs on making a comic." And they were doing Back to Mysterious Island, and totally, like, I don't know how this happened, but Max Landis was the writer on that, and yeah, and which was,
That's weird.
I know it was a
Like a
little weird,
small
and
world.
yeah, it was, and I remembered, say what you will, setting all the stuff since then aside, um, the script was solid, although it was definitely of its time. Like, there was some really edgy stuff in it that I was like, I don't know about this, but I mean, at the time, I was like, oh man, this is really cool and edgy, but whatever, it's so cool and edgy. I mean, but it was a fun idea, and I think that and it just and so the problem was that I actually illustrated a whole first issue, I think, and but I could not make the deadlines because I was still in college and I still had to, like, go to school and stuff, and you can't be on a monthly book doing the kind of detail work that I wanted to do. And then, like, and like, the editor wasn't liking the way the colors were meshing because we were just going straight from pencils to digital colors, and just so eventually he pulled me from the interiors. He was like, Matt, we're gonna go in a different direction. And but he kept me on for covers, so I did covers for that. I don't think I still have those interior pages anymore. I think those got thrown out because I just, like, I had kind of ugly feelings about those interiors, which is kind of sad because, like, now I kind of want to go back, and I bet I have them on a hard drive somewhere though, because I know I scanned all of them. But yeah, that was that. That was and I kind of stuck around for a little bit. I did a cover here and there. That was my first full book was under that Ray Harryhausen presents banner. We did the Wrath of the Titans Cyclops one shot, which was really fun, um, and is definitely like a weird bit of Harryhausen, again, Harryhausen lore, Harryhausen ephemera that I think a lot of people kind of forget exists. So,
Is I assume it's out of print, or can you like get it okay on the secondhand market, or is it just kind of like one of those comics that's kind of ridiculously priced since it's out of print?
oh, I don't think they're super expensive. I know I have a bunch of them, and I can't speak to all of them, but I actually haven't looked up, like, what the prices are now. But if somebody wants one, you can just email me. I'm sure I've got some. I might put some up. I just opened up a web store, so I might put some up on the store, actually. Because now I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I got stuff. I got stuff that I don't want to have to cart around to conventions. So
Yeah,
anyway,
plug that site.
yeah, we'll do that at the end.
So jumping into IDW, how did you land that gig? Because I mean, you've had such a um, what am I? The word I'm looking for is long-standing, but perhaps a little different. You've been with IDW for a long time, so
Mm.
where did that relationship begin?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd say long-standing relationship is accurate. A very storied relationship. Um, it started in 2010, and I remember the events very distinctly because that was a weird year for me. Um, like, I was like, I had been living with my parents for the first part of the year, and then I moved back to Austin, and this, because it was 2010 in America. Uh, I had just graduated from college not long before that, so of course the economy had collapsed, and there were, like, no jobs. So I had to, like, like a lot of us, I had to move in with my folks for a little bit. But then, like I said, I got a part-time job, moved back to Austin, and it was late 2010 when I saw the announcement for the Godzilla license at IDW. And I remember distinctly because I had done a little bit of IDW work before that. I had worked with Chris Ryle, who was the former editor in chief, and he was and I had done some Transformers stuff, but I knew like, and I remember talking to Chris Mowry at the time, who was also a writer and designer, graphic designer, and he did a bunch of stuff at IEW. And I was talking to him about like, oh yeah, hopefully we get the Godzilla license, and then we can make a Godzilla comic. And at the time, Chris was like, said he was having a bite. He was having to bite his knuckle because bite his tongue rather, because they were working on the license and he just couldn't tell me. But when they got the license, and my buddy Chris Merjahangir from Toho Kingdom actually called me and was like, "Well, Matt, he at first he was like, Matt, were you going to tell me?" And I was like, "Tell you what?" And he's like, "Oh, you didn't know?" And I'm like, "No, what? What are you talking about?" And that was how I found out. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm like bouncing around like 9 different threads here, but
I'm
the
following. You're good. You're good. I'm
okay, good.
following.
The long of the short of it is that I ran back home because I was like checking the mail or something, and I ran back home. I jumped on my computer. I emailed Chris. Hey, Chris, remember me? Remember what a big Godzilla fan I am? And he was like, Matt, I'm at New York Comic Con. I'll call you when I get home. And so, but he actually did from that point bring me on um as a cover artist, and that was when we did the Godzilla stomping cover promotion. And it was a perfect gig for me because it was a big promotional campaign. I wasn't really a name, quote unquote, at the time, but they knew that I was a big fan who would probably work for cheap, and but they knew that I could get it done. Um, and initially, it was only going to be because the cover promotion I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I vividly remember this.
Okay,
I don't remember the exact. There was multiple shops. Like I remember that there was an incentive cover for a specific comic book shop. I think it was in Texas. I might be way off base here, but
yeah,
Godzilla's foot was hitting the comic shop. That's the one I
yeah.
remember.
So they did that for initially it was going to be like 20 stores, and they said you've got about 2.5 weeks to do this. And I thought, you know what? I'll do the foot, and I'll swap out the stores. I can get this done. Then they were like, okay, Matt, we have like 70 stores now. And I'm like, oh, shit. So what I wound up doing was I called up like just about every professional artist I knew, just like just trying to get as many as I could. And it was just like, okay, hey, guys, I need your help with this. And I created like a group chat for people, or I created an email chain for everybody. I essentially became like a project manager at that point. And I gave like told okay, when you're done with your lines, put it in this folder, and then colorists, you're assigned. This is your list. You get it from that folder, and you color it. And yeah, and it turns out that working really, really hard sometimes does sometimes net you some goodwill with the company you're working with. So after that point, IDW, the people at IDW, the editors at IDW were like, "Oh man, you want to do more Godzilla stuff?" I'm like, "Uh-huh." So that was how it started.
That's
Yeah.
that is not the story I was expecting, but it's a great story.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
So, I mean, my next question in line, as you know, because you've seen the notes, was did you kind of wave at IDW when you were doing Transformers? Go, hello, Godzilla. I like Godzilla, but that was already answered. So
Yeah, pretty much. That really was it. It was because they didn't get the Godzilla license until 2010, to my knowledge, and then and that really was. I think it actually must be remarked upon that the Godzilla comics were the first. That was like the first piece of official Godzilla media to come out since like Godzilla Unleashed, which was like 2007. So, and the comics didn't really come out until 2011. So it was, that's a good 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's like 4 or 5 years Like, so it was, and even then, like Godzilla Unleashed was like the only thing that was out there aside from I think Hallmark or American Greetings are doing their ornaments. The Slim Pickens, Slim Pickens, Slim
Hey,
Pickens.
hey, don't you're forgetting about the YouTube video from Always Sunset on Third Street 2.
Oh yeah, the
That
one,
everyone
the,
watched.
the one video clip that we kept watching over and over and over again. That's all we had. Yeah, I mean, there were like I mean, it's so interesting because that era did produce some of like the best kaiju media in like the last 20 plus years, in my opinion. I think Gamera the Brave is one of the best monster movies ever
I
made, and I think
completely agree with you. I love Gamera the Brave so
so good.
much.
And then what was the other one? And you know what? I think Cloverfield is actually a lot better than people give it credit for.
I
Um,
love yeah.
it's definitely more visceral in the theater. It's more like a theme park ride, but yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I love the design of Clover. I just get a little dizzy when I watch Cloverfield, and it sucks because I think the viral marketing. Not to go on this tangent over here, but the viral marketing is something I remember as a fan of monster movies very vividly. Like, what does the Cloverfield monster look like? And this person had drawn out like this mutated blue whale and
Yeah, I remember
posted it
that
all
one.
over the internet. That
I
was
remember.
man.
Yeah, I remember
Someone should use that.
somebody was trying to share this piece of art, saying like, "Oh, this is the leaked design," and it was, and I looked at it and I was like, "That's the monster from Ultraman Nexus. Get that bush league shit out of here!" Like, what do you think? What is this amateur? Or come on. Um, so yeah, I mean, thank God, there was still Ultraman stuff happening at that time, and some of the best
There's
Ultraman stuff, in my opinion. But
they're still going strong.
anyway.
So I did mention Transformers, and we did talk about Godzilla. As an illustrator, going back between robots and kaiju, of course they are vastly different. Love the head moving.
Mhm.
Um, so they're vastly different characters with different attributes, different just layouts and bodies and stuff.
Mhm.
What else can you say about the stark differences in drawing them and bringing them visually on a page of a comic?
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, ultimately, like everything kind of goes through the same wiring when you're drawing, and you're an art. If you're an artist and you're drawing, but there are definitely certain subjects that you're going to be more comfortable with than others, and I think that monsters are definitely my comfort zone, my sweet spot, just because they're very visceral, they're very fun to draw, they have all this crap coming off of them, and you don't have to worry too much about anatomy, because anatomy can really trip you up if you're trying to draw people, and the human brain is wired to kind of recognize when something looks off. That's how you know that the people who are trying to push all this AI stuff keep trying to share uh sexy ladies and stuff, but their hands are all janked up. That's how you know they have no art training at all, because you know an artist would have noticed that, but they're so hyped on their ability to like punch a button and make a boob that they are like, look at the thing. It's like your hands all screwed up, dude. Anyway, I'm sorry, I don't want to go down that tangent. uh, so because my point to that is, at the end of the day, a person is still making those decisions, and with robots specifically, are fun. Robots are fun to start drawing, and they're fun to finish drawing. But the middle part is so difficult because you have to keep track of their joints and their paneling, because it's like a robot crossing its arms is so difficult to draw, because especially a transformer that often has these big boxy limbs, they're not going to cross their arms the way a person does, because they don't fold like that. So I remembered, I think it was Don Figueroa who used to do Transformers books. He would draw the Transformers with their arms like this, and that was how they crossed their arms. And I remember that was a really interesting that was an interesting way to kind of reinterpret that. So you have to have like low level engineering skills in order to like make a convincing looking robot, but they're still fun. But that's why I prefer Beast Wars. Like the Beast Wars Transformers are my favorites because I get the best of both. I get like the cool dynamism of a robot, but it's got like animal stuff on it. So it means I can also kind of cheat a little bit, and I don't have to pay that close of attention to it. But it also depends on the robot, because different robots, smoother like smoother mechs like an Evangelion or something are going to be inherently a little easier to draw because they have curvier, smoother lines that you don't have to sit there and like every line is straight, every line needs a ruler. So yeah. So that I think that's the short version.
And then you got like the example that came to my mind when you were talking was like G1 Ratchet with the giant window boobs. And then you're talking about folding the arms like that. I was like, oh man, like
Yeah.
Ratchet or Ironhide. I was like, oh no.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't even bother with trying to cross their arms. Like Prime himself is difficult enough to do that. I do remember this is a funny anecdote. I did the Transformers like Mars Attacks crossover comic because like the IDW did a whole like event where all the Martians are attacking all these different franchises that they had licensing for, and they did the Transformers like Mars Attacks the Transformers, and I was the interior line artist on that, and I I did that comic so fast. I think I did it in like 20 days or something. Like ridiculous. It's just like like no one should have to make an entire comic in 20 days, but I did it. But you can tell I was rushing a few times because I did a bit where so there's a moment when Ironhide gets his arm blown off by the Martians. So he's got to keep it with him, so he straps it to his back. The problem is that the arm keeps changing. Like sometimes it's his left arm, sometimes it's his right arm, some of the thumbs on this side, sometimes the thumbs on this side, and I just didn't care. I was just trying to get the stupid thing done. So yeah, that's a fun anecdote about drawing robots.
That is what an antidote though. It's an interesting thing that I don't think too many people really sit down and have the discussion about.
It's
But
fun.
moving on, yeah, moving on. So you've done work for both shores. I'll say, you've done some work for Subaraya officially. You've done some work for U.S. based companies. What are some of the major differences in working for each part of the ocean? I guess we'll call it.
I think that's a good question, actually. The I'd say that one of the biggest differences is there's not a lot of pomp and circumstance when working with American companies. Like you will sometimes get a nice, very formal letter or formal invitation. But generally speaking, American companies tend to be a lot less formal. They tend to be a lot more like, hey, you want to work? You want to do this? You want to do a thing? Like literally, the last couple of emails I've gotten, like job offers I'd gotten, were like, "Hey, you want to Gorgo?" it's like it's they're so like, and sometimes there'll be a little more to it than that. Like when I got invited to do Gamera, it was very much like, "Hey, really like your stuff. We're wondering if you were available to." We're doing a Gamera Blu-ray release. We'd like to know if you wanted to be involved. A little more formal. Japanese side of things, it's all formality and it's very polite and it's a lot of politeness. Um, I it's just there's more social graces that go into it, and that's part of their culture as well. I mean, it's part of our culture is to be fair, much more casual about stuff, whereas part of their culture, there's a there's a formality to a lot of things. You have to do things a certain way. Like I remembered, I even got a rejection at one point because I had made a proposal of a particular project that I can't talk about, but I made a proposal, and the letter back I got. Now, if it was an American company, they would have been like, "We're not really going in that direction," or "We decided to. We're not going to do this. Sorry, and but thanks though," or not even any of that. They're just like, "No, we're not doing that." Um, the Japanese response was, "We're very sorry. We discussed it internally." And we decided that this was not the direction we're going to go in. This is not a reflection on you or your artistic abilities or how would we feel about you as a company. We very much want to keep working with you. And it was just, there was all these layers to it. And in a way, I really appreciated the acknowledgement of protecting my feelings. And in a way, I really appreciate that because again, sometimes with American stuff, it can be very ambiguous. And with Japanese stuff, it can be ambiguous too, but it just depends on the circumstance. But that's the biggest difference. Other than that, a lot of it is the same. Like so stuff goes for approvals. Well, we need you to change this, or oh, we need you to change that because this is not on model, or oh yeah, this project you can go off model, but this project you need to stay on model. A lot of that's the same, but yeah, I think it's the formalities and the general tone is different.
This might be a dumb question, but just for the people that will watch and read, um, do they usually send like a fluent English speaker, or is there like some translation that goes back and forth when you're getting notes back?
Oh, there's almost always well, again, it's also dependent on the situation, but in my experience, it'll go through either a person in the company who speaks English fluently, or whatever company I'm working with as like an in between. They'll have somebody who translates. There has to be a translator in the mix at some point, but I would say the most consistently they seem to. Well, my two biggest interactions have been either with somebody in the company who speaks English, or I do a lot of my publishing work in Japan through Phase Six, which they are professional translators, and so they're all bilinguals. Everybody in the company can speak some degree of English and Japanese, so we're able to. They pass me notes like from the licensor by translating it first. So that hopefully that explains the process.
State
Yep.
of the Monsters. I want to get that in. I want to make sure we talk
Yeah.
about that.
Sure.
I do know that that's Matt's project. It takes place in
That's true.
Texas, hence State of the Monsters. Yeah, that's true.
Yes. Yes.
um,
Oh yeah.
anything you can tell us about State of the Monsters right now? Like any updates or like what's going on with State of the
What is
Monsters? What
it?
is
Yeah. What even is this? Um. So. Oh, so State of the Monsters is one of those things that I just like. I realize that this is gonna be my big. Uh, it's me kind of swinging for the fences because I've been wanting to do something original for a while, and I've done original stuff. I did a comic called Miss Medusa's Monstrous Menagerie with a company that is Unlikely Heroes. Was Unlikely Heroes was the publisher. Unlikely Heroes is not around anymore, but the new publisher that kind of rose from the ashes was Laguna Studios, and I know the people who run it, and they're good people, and they're now based in Texas, which is really cool. That I'm like, this is that's I get to work with a Texas publisher, and the um I'm trying to think of the specifics here. So the basic idea is that it is a kaiju story set in Texas, but what happens and this is inspired by a lot of real life events, of course, as kaiju stories often are. There back in 2021 there was this big freeze that hit Texas, and for those of you who don't know, and a lot of northern states kind of scoffed at the numbers But the thing is that a lot of people don't know is that Texas does not have the infrastructure to deal with a huge statewide freeze. I mean, we were down to the minute of the entire power grid being disabled for months. Like, it got real bad. And I think last I heard, like 300 people died just freezing to death in their homes. Like, and of course, there's a lot more to that I could go into, but I don't, it's a lot of it political and that can get very dry. So the short version is, if a kaiju were to attack Texas, the power grid would be the first thing to go down, and it's not coming back. And then it becomes a domino chain. So I started thinking about that, and I was already kind of kicking around some other ideas of like, well, what if I did this and what if I did that? Because I wanted an original kaiju story, and the big thing that I kept coming back to was like, man, all this stuff is kind of Texas in its theming. It's all kind of like flavored around Texas. So eventually, that got compiled into this one idea, and now I've finished the script for the first issue. The idea is that it is 15 years after kaiju started showing up in Texas. The society, and the state has been cut off. This might be a little on the nose, but the federal government built a wall around Texas, and because they're like, we don't want him, but the power grid is down. That means the state is on its own. There's monsters, and so they can just have it. They just let the monsters have it. So, but there are still people who live in Texas. So, what can you do? Like, so fast forward, over a decade. What does that society look like? What are people like in this little micro country, this micro environment? But I think it's important to remember Texas is really big. Like, you can put the entire state of Connecticut over Houston. Like, all of Houston takes up, the Houston and the surrounding area takes up almost the entire state of Connecticut. That gives you an idea of how big, like, Texas is as big as Japan, like, size wise. Like, if you were to crumple Japan down. So there's definitely enough room for a bunch of monsters to run around. So, and that's the basis of it. And my hope is, like I said, I finished the first issue's script. We're editing it now. We're hoping to launch a Kickstarter for it, if not this year, maybe next year. It's proving, it's a lot of work, especially for the standards. I'm holding myself to a certain level, a certain standard here. So I want this to look really good and to read like, I wanted to read like a movie. So it'll be a little bigger than a usual comic size, because I'm always a little like, I love that there are Kickstarters. Like, a lot of comics nowadays are being published entirely through Kickstarter and BackerKit and stuff.
Especially kaiju comics.
Yes, I got stomped recently, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really well done. And then
Territory is really nice too. I don't know if you've seen Territory by.
I'm familiar with it. I'd like to. I need to read it. I've heard really good things. They actually they actually asked me to do a cover for an issue of Territory. And I wasn't thinking I was going to be able to do it. And now I'm kind of looking at my schedule and I'm like, maybe I can. But anyway, but I need to read it first. I would like to read it first before I actually drew for it. But anyway, there's so it's a lot of elements that are maybe not entirely original, but I think I'm hoping a way I put them all together will be fresh and unique, and I'm hoping that I can really, because I'm going to quote a friend of mine. They had a quote for a project they were working on where they said, "It's a broken-hearted love letter to Texas," and I feel like that's very accurate. I cannot take credit for that quote. That is my friend, and they. Although I don't know if they necessarily want it known. Anyway, don't worry about it. But I feel like that's very accurate for mine as well, because a lot of Texans, we love Texas, mostly because we grew up here, but a lot of us are also kind of resentful of Texas, resentful of having to be here and being stuck here in a lot of ways because Texas is an extremely diverse state. We have a lot of different kinds of people and different communities. I mean, it's huge. We've a massive state, but there's a lot of problems here. There's a lot of problems here, and there are specific reasons why those problems exist that aren't getting addressed. Anyway, like I said, we're not getting into it. We're not getting into it. You read the book, and you'll know all about my opinions. I mean, honestly, I when it comes to politics in my work, I really truly try not to be didactic, and I try not to be on a soapbox, and because then you're just grinding your story to a halt, so you can yell at the audience. And I feel like the only ones who can get away with that is Star Trek, and it's really hard for other stories to get away with that. I mean, you have stuff like X-Men and a lot of franchise like Superman Smashes the Klan is one of my favorite comics I've ever read, and it's like perfect political allegory. It's so good. So yeah, but it's finding that balance of like I want to say something with this, but I also want to entertain. So what's the balance there? So anyway, that is my State of the Monsters ramble.
Good ramble.
Yay.
Sweet. I can't wait to see it. I saw the initial like tease and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this will be fun." But
I'm hoping it. I mean, everybody I've shown the script to has really liked it, and my editor really likes it. So, you know, um, I love pushing boundaries and doing weird stuff with scripts, but I feel like this script is honestly a little on the very like kind of I don't want to call it like basic, but it is kind of like here's the introduction of the characters, here's the introduction of conflict, here's the rising action, here's the falling action. It's a little bit like storytelling 101, but I am proud of it. I feel like it conveys the world, it opens the world up well enough. So
it's a good
anyway,
chapter one.
yes.
The community, a lot of people in this community have followed you for a very, very, very long time. I first met you when I was 14 at my very first G Fest when I had a bowl cut and not a mane. Um, how do you feel about this loyal, passionate, loving community? Because I really feel like that. I know there's a lot of people that are cynical about this community, but I mean, what's your favorite part about these wonderful people? Say something nice.
you know, honestly, when you know, honestly, whenever I see people grousing about the kaiju community I see that and I think, man, I must be really lucky because a lot of my interactions have been really positive. Some of my lifelong best friends are in this community, and I think it really is a question of who you choose to give the gift of your time and the gift of your attention. Because yeah, you can spend a lot of time. You can in any community, you can find people to just pour your energy into fighting. And I feel like that's common in a lot of communities. It's one of the reasons why I have no interest in talking about Star Wars because and it's not to say I don't like Star Wars. I'm just very ambivalent. And the few times I've tried to talk about Star Wars, especially Star Wars I like don't like, man, and which is so funny. I think there's a quote that somebody said that like no one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans. But I don't want to dunk on Star Wars fans all day. In this community, I think it's a very small, very tight knit community. I think a lot of us have known each other for a long time. What G Fest did we meet at? Which one was that?
2012.
Oh my God. Uh, God. Oh my God. That's more than 10 years ago. Oh. No, but that's cool though. That's a really nice, that's nice though. I remember that was a good year. That was a good year. I remember that.
It was the best year. It was my favorite. But
Yeah.
that aside,
Yeah. So, like, I think a good example of the community is G Fest itself because Like there have been some dust ups with the management at G Fest, and that's not really a secret. There have been some issues with getting actually letting artists into the show. I'm one of the only artists left who goes to G Fest simply because I have the body of work to be able to do it. But again, that's a whole rabbit hole we don't have to go into. But the community of G Fest is really strong, and most of the people I meet there are very cool and very sweet and very tight knit. And it's like it become. I remember because I took Caston to her first G Fest in 2022. That was the first year they had it back, and then last year we went and we were going and getting set up, and we were just walking the hallways and people were like, hey, hey, saying hi and stuff. I'm just used to it because I've been doing it for over 10 years. And Cass was like, well, it's like a family reunion or like a class reunion. And I'm like, this is your second one. um, I just thought that was really cute and very cute because it is, because people are really like, I think that people generally, when you meet them in person, I've noticed that like the people who are cool are cool. The people who are dicks are just going to be looking at their feet. They're not going to start anything. I had to really I felt so bad. There was this one person in the fandom that I had to kind of coax to coming to G Fest. And that's not to say that people don't have bad experiences. Like there are definitely stories. There's always, you get enough groups, you get enough of a Venn diagram of humanity together, you're going to have some bad interactions. um, but I remembered this one person was really nervous about going because they had some problems with some other people online, and they were like, well, I don't want to go and have them start something or have them do this or that. And I told them, like, that's not going to happen. Like, it's okay. Like,
It's
it's
holy
okay.
ground.
Yeah, and let's be clear about something. I'm also in a position of privilege to be able to say that. I've Since going to G Fest, even before I was working officially on Godzilla stuff, I still had a bit of a status because people knew me from online. And I'm also a white dude. Like, I don't have as much to worry about as someone of a different demographic. And so, but I did tell them, like, I'm not saying that it's impossible that something will happen or somebody's going to do something stupid. However, there's a really good chance that nothing will happen. And if and you also would be denying yourself the possibility of really good stuff happening, of connecting with people and people who you will become friends with and who will love you and want to share this passion with you. Again, I'm coming at it from a perspective of privilege. My experiences are not universal. And I do know people who've had really bad experiences at G Fest. Again, it's a cross section of humanity, and if you're cultivating a certain culture, or if a certain culture happens to be really aggressive and dominant, there's 1,000 different reasons why stuff could go to shit. I'm sorry, can we curse on this show?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure of that.
Oh, you're
Um,
good.
but for me, it's the fact that this is always going to be kind of a niche culture, and I have worked really hard to curate the people, again, that I give my time. Again, I was talking to somebody else who was having trouble with other fans online, some other group of fans that was giving them a hard time, and I told them, why are you giving them your time of day? Why are you giving them the attention? Like, and this is, I'm not victim blaming here either. I have to put in my qualifiers. Not everyone has those coping mechanisms of being able to tell someone, you know what? I don't care. I don't care what you have to say. Why would I, block and move on? Sometimes that's hard to do, especially if there's like a bunch of people actively trying to harass you for whatever reason. There's always mitigating factors. Again, I am very fortunate that I have worked really hard to cultivate my experiences and cultivate a really, really loving group of people. And I try to give good vibes when I get them. If I was ever, I will say to anybody watching, if I was ever short or if I was ever like snippy, it's not about you. 9 times out of 10, it's not about you unless you have like a really bad haircut or something. The I'm kidding. Uh, I'm just very I am in a lot of ways kind of protective of this fandom as well, because sometimes people are a little mean towards the broader, like they'll paint the whole fandom with the same brush, and I'm like, they're some of the coolest
Mm.
people I know. You know, it's one of the reasons why I desperately want there to be a Godzilla, a G fan artist alley, a G Fest artist alley again, because some of those people are super cool, and I never get to see them outside of conventions. And you know, so I'm very, like I said, I'm very fortunate that I have this really cool support network and these really cool fans who are really sweet and supportive, and have definitely made me cry on a few occasions. So yeah.
We think the same. I am very protective over this community,
Mhm.
especially with the newfound platform with Kaiju United and all that fun stuff. It's an interesting new perspective to look at. So, on a deeper or think about it level, philosophical level, what does Godzilla mean to you? What does Kaiju mean to you on a deeper level?
That is a really good question. I think that kaiju is the kaiju and Godzilla and all that. I think it's very malleable, but I was thinking about like some of the direct appeal that some of this stuff has, um, and how like, and this is something I was talking about with Caston recently. The idea that like I think there's this kind of core appeal that kids have growing up with Godzilla specifically, or with kaiju, but you know they always get exposed to Godzilla first. It's the idea of being able to do whatever you want. There's a lot of appeal to being Godzilla, you know, and especially when you're a kid and you're watching the actors in the suits. It's a lot easier to put yourself in the position of Godzilla destroying miniatures and stuff. And so as a kid, your suspension of disbelief is also a lot, you know, broader. So I think that there's a direct visceral connection to be basically being able to do whatever you want, and that brings out some of the best and some of the worst in the fandom, because you know some of the negative aspect of that is it has this very, you know, toxically masculine approach of this toxically masculine factor of like, well, I'm Godzilla, I can do whatever I want, I can hurt people and nobody can stop me. And then I think the reverse of that for the reverse of that is like, well, I'm Godzilla, you can't hurt me, and you can't hurt the people I care about. Like it becomes this protective thing. Um, and so I think that's kind of how it starts for fans, and then expanding from that. Kaiju again, they kind of, there's actually a line from Jurassic World that I actually think is a really good one, even though because I think it applies. I have my problems with that movie, but I think this line kind of also applies to kaiju stuff. They're there to remind us how small we really are, and kaiju, like as a narrative device, are there to remind us that, oh, we don't always have control over what's going to happen. You know, there are four, I mean, we're dealing with that culturally right now in a lot of ways. You know, there's a lot of really bad stuff happening, and it's easy to feel totally powerless. What I think is important with the movies and with the narratives is that it's important to look to the human characters and see what are they doing to solve this problem. Like minus one is a great example of that. It's a bunch of normal people getting together, and they found a really creative way to stop Godzilla. And I think that that is a really good example of like humans are really adaptable. We're small, but we are adaptable, and we are capable of doing great things. But there's always going to be roadblocks, and you know, I think that's the long of the I think that's the long of the short of it. I think that is the best summary I can give. I mean, there's probably about 1,000 other words I could say on the subject, but let's move on.
That's great. That's a solid answer though, and I think it really speaks to all of us.
Thank
So,
you.
Matt, we are pretty much at the end, but I want you to plug yourself. Just let us know where we can find you, where we should go. You should buy this cool Baragon shirt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wait, let me move my mic. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, I gotta. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was totally accidental. We did not plan that. I went and I put it on for the show. That's
I was
awesome.
wearing it for the show. I was like, oh, I got Matt Frank's art on a shirt. I'm gonna wear it.
I have so many shirts with my art on them. I could have worn any of them, but um, keep an eye on Ghost X Ghost. That's one thing I will say. These shirts, they do have a couple of my shirts still, but like certain shirt drops are very limited. We just did the Godzilla X Kong Evolved Godzilla shirt. That was really fun. I really enjoyed doing that. It was really cool seeing what Godzilla was going to look like months before anybody else did. That was really fun. Um, and so, in addition to that, you can find me. My regular stuff is mattfrankart.net is my main website. I have a store now. It's mattfrankart.bigcartel.com. Um, I'm posting. I got a bunch of prints up there. I have originals. I'm gonna start posting like stuff from my personal collection. So that's if you can't come to a convention to see me, you can always pick up, you can support me there. I've got patreon.com/mattfrankart. My Patreon, I try to update that as regularly as I can. It's sometimes very hard because a lot of the work I do is under contract and under NDA, but I try to post like State of the Monsters updates, and I try to use it as a sounding board for like, what do you guys want to see me do next for a print and stuff? And it's like $5 a month or something. I'm going to try to make a little more worth people's while in 2024. And like I said, if you go to my website, mattfrankart.net, you go to the links page, it has all my other stuff. It has my YouTube channel, and it has my podcast, and it has all the other crap, Instagram and Twitter and stuff. Generally, you can find my stuff if you type in Matt Frank and Godzilla, and you'll find my stuff. But yeah, that's I think that's about everything for now, anyway.
That's great. Well, Matt, on the public side, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and with Kaiju United. We're thrilled to have this day finally come and sit down with you and chat for an hour. We
Thank you.
really appreciate it.